Hello, everyone. Welcome to the Boston.com virtual book club. This is the second selection of 2022 and my first time hosting, and I'm really delighted to be with you here tonight. My name is Megan Hayden, and I am the owner of Riverbend Bookshop in Glastonbury, Connecticut. We're a very tiny independent bookstore just outside of Hartford. And we've been open for only 3 years. So to have a night like tonight, I'm really just pinching myself that I have the opportunity to be here with you and having a discussion with the brilliant and talented Gish Jen. I would like to thank tonight several people who helped us all to get here. Paul Swiden at the Silver Unicorn Bookstore in Acton, thank you so much for all of your hard work to launch this book club and help select these fabulous titles. And thanks so much for thinking of me to be a part of it. I also want to thank Catherine Haight at the Globe at Boston.com for a really lovely article that she did about our shop today. Which got me a bit verklempt and made my mother all out bawl. So thanks, Kat, very much for that. That was really exciting for us. And all of this, I have to tell you, is absolute magic for us at a little shop like this. And we're truly, truly grateful. So I hope that you'll have a chance to come and visit us in Glastonbury or see us out on the road when we launch the Riverbend Book Truck later this spring. We'll be out and about. But tonight, we welcome Gish Jen to talk about her new book, Thank You, Mr. Nixon, published by Knopf, which is part of Penguin Random House. This book, I'll show you here. Thank you, Mr. Nixon, if you haven't had a chance to pick up your copy yet. This book spans 50 years of American-Chinese relationships, and it's told in stories with some of the most intricate connections you'll ever see. Gish is a master of short work. You've seen her in the New Yorker, in the Atlantic, in dozens and dozens of publications and anthologies. Her work has appeared in the Best American Short Story collection 4 times, including the Best American Short Stories of the Century, edited by John Updike. She attended the illustrious Iowa Writers Workshop. She has won a slew of awards, held numerous fellowships, and was featured in a PBS American Masters special. She is currently a visiting professor at Harvard, and Thank You, Mr. Nixon is her 9th book. So Gish Jen, thank you for joining us tonight and welcome.
It is my pleasure, Megan. And I have to say, congratulations on your article, and I will definitely stop by your store one of these days.
Oh, thank you. I'm going to fangirl out and I'm going to make you sign all these copies.
Are you near West Hartford?
We are on actually the east side of Hartford, so we're about 20 minutes away. But if you drive through from Boston to New York, we're smack in the middle and a good time for a lunch break.
Oh, great. Well, actually, I'm going to be doing West Hartford reads before too long. I'll definitely drop you a line. And if I'm going to be in West Hartford, there's no reason I can't be in East Hartford. I'll definitely come by. Very
good. Thank you so much. Well, Gish, I was hoping that you would get started by reading us a little bit from the new book. Is that all right?
Of course. So this is a short story. This is from the book, Thank You, Mr. Nixon. And this is a very short story called Lulu in Exile. I originally wrote this story for Fashions of the Times. So you'll hear it has an unusual number of outfits in it. Lulu in Exile. Arnie Shu the Success, brother of Duncan Shu the Failure, had his own import-export business. This now involved not only a US office and a Hong Kong office, but a factory in Shanghai and a factory in Hong Kong, and as well as a factory in Italy, and 40 lucky employees, all of whom amassed frequent flyer miles at an enviable rate as a result of their good attitude toward life. Arnie, who boasted the best attitude of everyone, wore Italian suits and colors named for vitamin-rich vegetables like eggplant and kale. Also, he wore wraparound sunglasses and had his car washed inside and out while he went shopping with his nubile girlfriend from Hong Kong, Lulu. Lulu did not have to have a good attitude, being full of entertainingly skewed views. For example, she could never get over how underdeveloped malls were in America. She believed Americans were not true shoppers, being too enamored of parks. "Explain to me about trees," she once said to Duncan, showing him a tie she had bought for Arnie, but that Arnie had turned out to already own. "I know people in America like to walk around in the woods with the mosquitoes, but why do they like such things?" How about if you explain to me, okay? Her tone turned wheedling as she made a pretty show of her dimples. I give you this nice tie for a present. Nobody loved Hong Kong like Lulu. First of all, as a vertical city, easily negotiated by chauffeured car and elevator, Hong Kong was perfect for high heels. Also, it was a city where girls were girls, where Lulu could top a lime green bustier with a red velvet Mao jacket and laugh at American tourist girls in their flip-flops and sackcloth. But now, thanks to history, here appeared her future, Exile and natural fiber land. Some people thought Hong Kong would be fine after the handover, but the shoes certainly didn't. You watch, we are all going to end up in a nice American suburb, they predicted, including Lulu, in that we, even though Arnie and Duncan's mother wondered if Lulu would make a good wife. All she knows is spend money, Marge complained to Duncan. Never mind that she was theoretically not speaking to him. Recently, she had taken to cutting out articles about every sort of learning disability now known and sending them all to him, as if one of them must explain something. Children need a real mother. Tell them what to do. What is right attitude? What is wrong attitude? Who their friends should be? Otherwise, what? Otherwise, nobody is going to graduate school. That's what. Otherwise, all the kids turn out like me. Exactly. So bad the mothers can't sleep at night, thinking it's their own fault. What do you mean by fault? Marge said. You never listen to anything I say. You think you know everything already. That is your whole problem. If I tell you you are stupid, do you listen to me? Of course not. Instead, you say, if I'm so stupid, how come blah, 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 blah. But it's true, Ma. If I'm so stupid, Duncan tried to remind his mother that he did have a wife and kids and a tea shop that did break even. But Marge wasn't listening. Forget about true. That is your whole trouble. You want to tell me what is true, as if you are the mother. That's why I'm not speaking to you these days, because I am the mother. I am the one who says what is true. Do you hear me? Faintly, he said. This may or may not have been why his mother really did stop speaking to him, and how it happened that she advanced her plot on Lulu strictly on her own. Arnie did not believe this, but it was true. It was strictly on her own that Marge called the fanciest store in town and ordered a red silk duster, a matching red silk jumpsuit, and a see-through red motorcycle jacket, all in size 2. Try them on, said Marge, as Lulu opened the boxes. You can wear the jumpsuit with the duster or with the jacket, either way. Lulu hesitated. But I am a size 6. No, said Marge. Only in your mind you are size 6. What I say is true. You are size 2. Size 6 is the size of a horse. I'm not a horse, wailed Lulu. Of course not, said Marge. You are a size 2. Also, she cajoled Lulu into having lunch with her. Arnie says you love chocolate mousse, she said. To which Lulu said, no, only to have Marge order it anyway. Don't be polite, she said, and you haven't eaten one bite, and you don't like it? I order something else. No. But a banana split arrived, and after the banana split, a strawberry shortcake, and after the strawberry shortcake, a baked Alaska. I love you, Lulu told Arnie that night. You are a great success, but I wonder about our future. Oh, Lulu, said Arnie with a misty look, there's nothing to wonder about. I've just been waiting for the right moment to ask. That's not it. And the ring, you said yourself that you didn't know what cut you liked best. Your mother had so much fun. She wants to take me shopping every week, said Lulu. Arnie stopped short. She says if we get married, she's going to take me shopping every day. But Lulu, said Arnie, you like to shop. And after shopping lunch, said Lulu, she says if we get married, she's going to take me to lunch every single day. And that's too much to ask? To have lunch with my mother? For me? For us? I thought we were in love. We were, said Lulu. But then she could say no more, as, overcome by sobbing, she adjusted Arnie's tie for him one last sweet time.
Gish, thank you so much. I love that story because we all know that mother-in-law, and the power that she had wielded to break up a couple in one lunch is pretty incredible. Do you know this mother-in-law?
Money. I'm a little worried I'm turning into that mother-in-law. No, I mean, I'm not, but I mean, but you know what I mean? But I get it. I get it.
Well, it's a terrific story, and the characters that are in here, this is a lovely moment in the collection because you're meeting a lot of characters who you'll find out other things about or you already have some familiarity with. So this is where we're starting to piece together some of it. But if it's okay with you, before we jump that far, I thought we might start at the beginning with the titular story of this "Thank You, Mr. Nixon," which, if you don't mind my saying, is a little unconventional as a starting point. Because it's a letter written by a woman who was one of the young children that Nixon met in the park in his visit to China in 1972. And she's writing from heaven to thank him for the impact that he had on her life, because she had a good long life that was pretty heavily influenced by him, and certainly by his wife's choice of fashion there with a beautiful red coat. You write, the history books say China opened up when you shook hands with Chairman Mao, but I think it began with that coat. And then it's worth noting here that Nixon is presumed to be in hell because the letter is addressed to Ninth Ring Road. So could you start us there, guys? If you were wondering if this is the book for you, that should clue you in. It's a great place to start. Gish, will you tell us how did this story come about, and how did you choose this device to kick things off?
It just came to me, I have to say. So I think that as it was clear to me that I was going to be writing this book where, that was going to begin with Nixon's visit and go, all the way through to the present day. I had started writing as a writer kind of right after that. So I had stories all the way along. So from basically 1981 on, 1981 is when I went to graduate school. So I had stories all the way along, but I didn't have a story for the very moment when Nixon was there, right? So and I will say that I had stories. Actually, I started writing in 1981, but I also have notes from 1979, which is the first time my family went back to China. So I had notes from 1979, but I didn't have anything from 1972. So I thought, well, I'm going to have to write something that's, to kick this whole thing off. And I don't know, I just woke up in the morning and I started writing this letter, which, as you say, is from this girl, this made up girl. This is not the real girl in Hangzhou. He did go to Hangzhou and he did shake the hand of a little girl, but this is like another little girl that I made up. And she's writing to him in hell. She feels very bad that he's in hell because she feels that what he did wasn't so bad from their point of view.
Yeah, right.
From the Chinese point of view, really. I mean, it's like exactly. You stole some papers, and for that you went to hell. Ninth ring, first pit. That seems really kind of disproportionate to them. And also, but I do think that her memory of event, I think it was the memory of many of the common people. They really barely knew who Nixon was, and you know what I mean, and the geopolitics, especially, they didn't have social media then. It's not like they read about Richard Nixon in the news every day. They don't. They don't even get newspapers really. So what made an impression on them, and it was Pat Nixon's red coat. At that time, China, was a sea of navy blue and gray and black. And, the Chinese famous lovers of red, the communists had tried to get rid of this red thing, but in their heart of hearts, the Chinese loved red. And when they saw that coat, and you can only imagine what it looked, I mean, there was a picture of her, on the Great Wall. I mean, the Chinese were just gaga over the coat. And in this case, so this girl's life was changed by that coat. I mean, her mother, who's a dressmaker, goes on to make coats, and when it's time to dive into the capitalist sea, what do? They open that coat factory, and this girl is artistic, and she draws coats and she designs coats, and so, and of course, her journey is a metaphor for the journey of many Chinese whose lives were completely transformed, as were ours, by the opening of China. But it's two-way, and that's another thing in this story I wanted to, to not to forget that as much as our lives have been transformed, certainly the lives of the Chinese were also transformed.
Well, her life story is amazing. She becomes very successful. They find a way to get their product into America. It sort of launches this family generational wealth, and gives her a totally new perspective on life. But they never forget that they came from something difficult, and that hard work and making money are important because money is security, and it kind of follows them through. I just found that all really interesting.
Yeah, I think it's the case. And I will say that, many Chinese American people have said to me, it's like, oh my God, like I have a relative like that. And I myself have a relative, where, 1 minute they were literally had they had no food coupons. They had nothing to eat. And they're literally on the street starving. And they started trading shoes across the border to Russia. Now the guy is a big shoe magnate. He's, but they never forget. And I think that, so both things are true, that, some people have gone really from rags to riches in a way that we associate it with America, but really it's very Chinese now too, but they never forget, and I think that persists for generations. They never forget.
I found one aspect of the history telling in the book to be, firstly, so natural. So it was all fit in through these lovely family and personal stories. But I learned a lot about redistribution of wealth, what was happening with the Red Guard, how people from moneyed families were being treated. And of course, China's not the only place that ever experienced that. Russia, Mexico, Vietnam, so many places experienced something so similar. But how the people who lived with that carried it through and never kind of forgot about who was watching, what information was valuable, what things were better left to never see or willfully ignore, because information seemed so it seemed like such an important asset or a real threat to the families here. And I love all of the scenes where we talk about who's reporting you and who are the class monitors and who are the people that you have to be careful of.
Yeah, there was a lot of that in China, and there is a lot of it still. And but you're right, but it's not only China, right? I mean, it's an unbelievable number of societies where this has been true. And but it's interesting to me the way that stuff transforms people's lives. So, I think we've had a lot of books about, the geopolitics and things like surveillance and, and how surveillance has really been amped up recently. And I'm interested in all of that stuff. But, finally, my job is to talk about, how geopolitics alters our inner landscapes. Like what does it do to us? What does it do to our families? What does it do to our possibilities? And and what what I mean, and what do we carry forward from the old world, like it or not, and what can't we stop when we get to the new world, where we think that things are going to be better, but then we discover that actually our families aren't going to look the way we thought that they would look, and what do we do with that, and so that's my territory.
Well, I'm glad you explored it. In the selection that you read earlier, we got to see some of your terrific humor in there. There were some funny parts, but you also use humor throughout to talk about some really difficult things. And surveillance actually is one of them. There's a section that I really love where some kind of first generation couple here and the in-laws are visiting from China, and they're having a discussion about whether surveillance really happens in America. Is America spying on their own people? And it's a great back and forth about do they, don't they? Oh, of course they do. Of course they do. And then the mother-in-law says something like, wait, that's crazy, because watching everybody is a lot of work. Americans would not do that much work. Only Chinese people would work that hard. Americans are really lazy, which made me cackle a bit, because there were 3 or 4 parts earlier in the book where I'm reading about the class monitors and the reports. And I actually was thinking to myself, who's doing all this reporting? Who has the time to read all these reports? What's the bureaucracy like to make all of this happen, that everybody can process all of these reports? And so I realized, like, yes, Americans like me are too lazy to be doing that. But I do love that, that what it really tells you, yes, we are, but perhaps not to the same degree.
Well, you guys in the report making and report reading was a very important part of kind of Chinese culture from way, way, way back, and so that's one thing. And the other thing is that they just have a lot more labor than we do. Do you know what I mean? So there was a way in which they have all those they pay all these people to to post things online, and they're getting what they're getting paid to do those posts is very, 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 very low. And people in America wouldn't be posting for the government for those kind of wages. So it's just one more thing that they can get people to do, because there isn't enough work. And I suspect that once they that their people have other opportunities, they too will find it hard to get people to read all these reports. But you're right, and but there's a lot, but this idea of reporting, and of course, sometimes that took a terrible turn, like during the Cultural Revolution, where people would be reporting on their own families. And this whole idea of reporting is a very big deal. Yeah, no, it's and that's example of where the politics of a place they become your family's reality, and that happens here too, right? I mean, it isn't only in China, but it's very noticeable in China, I will say.
Sure. Well, and even in this moment when we've got athletes from all over the world gathered in Beijing for the Olympics, and American athletes were instructed to bring burner cell phones to reduce spying. I mean, that's kind of an incredible statement on what our fears are. But I was thinking too about this work goes all the way through present time. So through the Yellow Umbrella protests in Hong Kong, and Hong Kong people trying to fight to maintain their independence and their education systems, and independent politics and whatnot. And it got me thinking about some of the dangers for booksellers and journalists and authors there right now. And I wonder how you are feeling about putting a piece of work like this into the world, and what that means for you for return to China. Do you see yourself returning to China anytime soon? Do you feel safe having taken a pretty outspoken position?
Yeah, the funny thing is, it's as you may or may not know, throughout my career, I have not been one of the voices that argue that China should become democratic. So throughout my career, I have really been a big kind of a voice for cultural difference, and respecting that the Chinese have a different way, they have a different culture, different way of seeing things, different problems. They have different challenges. So you can't just port the American way over there. That said, I think the Chinese have gone too far in their censorship, and so I don't really see a story like Detective Dog as being this terrible affront to them, but I am also aware that actually no, because of Detective Dog, I cannot go back to China anymore. I think I had to write it. It was the truth. And but no, I can't go back, because that was in the New Yorker. I mean, I think that maybe it was a little less prominent, but because it was so prominent, I can't go back. But what does that say? To me, it says that I'm hoping that China can see that even friends of the country, such as and I am very much a friend of China's, but they've taken such a hard line, trying to control what we can say, even in America, that they've alienated even people like me. And I'm hoping, of course, that they will think again. China has changed so much in the last about 50 years. I mean, if you think about the change over the last 100 years, I mean, the amount of change has just been, it just staggers the imagination. And so I'm hoping that, in fact, though right now things look so bleak, that, come, 10 years from now, that the pendulum will have swung the other way. And right now, this business of nobody can say the word Taiwan, like no company can say, nobody can have anything having to do with Taiwan, even in the finest print that nobody reads. There can't be Taiwan in there anywhere. This is just a little extreme, right? I mean, I feel like, you can go ahead and say that, you have a very different opinion about, what should be going on in Taiwan than the US say, much less the Taiwanese. But to say that nobody can use the word Taiwan is just so extreme, I mean, it's just so extreme. So I had something pulled. Actually, a cousin of mine wrote a book, and she wrote it in Taiwan. I met her in Taiwan, and she asked me to write a little preface for it. It's coming out now in the United States at HarperCollins, and in English. And would I write a little preface? So I wrote a little preface, of course, because I had met her in Taiwan. She is my cousin. I used the word Taiwan, and because it was being printed in China, they said that I had to take the word Taiwan out. And I just pulled it. I said, I can't, it's ridiculous. I mean, this level of censorship is just ridiculous. So anyway, there it is.
Wow.
But yes, but that's a great example of, of how kind of, little, you would think, here I am in Cambridge, Massachusetts. How can it be that some story that I wrote means that I can never go back to China, and I cannot see my relatives there, and they're old, and I don't know if I will see like my aunties before they die. Probably not. And to feel like, that this is the situation, it's just wrong. I mean, I feel like this is just, it's too extreme, and it's wrong.
Thank you for sharing that with us. That's, you said in part that you had to write that story, the final story of the book, and it is so beautiful and so touching. And I just got goosebumps from my ears to my toes in the final few sentences of that story. But when work has to come out, like how do you know that a story is worth what will come after you put it into the world, whether it's something that's very, clearly connected to people that or family members that you have, or those kinds of things, or related to the world at large?
Well, one of the things that I was taught from in graduate school, which is still true, is that, you write what's forbidden. I mean, that's the whole point of fiction. And a lot of times when people are sort of, well, what does it mean? What's literary fiction? Like, what does that mean? And that means that, there's something that you realize you kind of shouldn't say, but you realize is true, and so that's, any woman who realizes, like, what, my husband controls me, and that's not right, but I'm not supposed to say so because it's not nice. That voice is the voice that I was taught you should be listening to. I mean, that is our job as writers, to represent those things. And so that is, when I guess it's to sort of say, when I hear that voice that says, actually, you can't write that, that is the very voice that I must heed. And when I hear, like, you can't write that, and when I think, well, why exactly is that? And if I don't agree, that's what I signed up for when I signed up to be a writer. So I could hear the voice that said, you shouldn't do that. And well, there's the story.
Well, thank you for being brave for all of us. I appreciate that. I am, if it's okay with you, going to switch gears and ask you some other questions about the writing process and things like that. But I wanted to invite all of our guests here, if they have questions, to feel free to drop them in the chat, which I'll be taking a look at. I'll be the only one that can see those, so they don't go to all participants, but I'm taking a look at that, or in the Q&A panel. So if you have any questions for the incredible Gish Jen, please do put them in there. But until then, I'm made of questions. So there are so many things that I want to know about you and your career and your writing process, because you produce a lot of work, and a lot of really beautiful and critically acclaimed work. So I was wondering if you could let us in on the insight for short story writing. Do you tend to start with something, in this particular case, because the stories are woven together, did you start with one and build out from there? Did you write it chronologically? How did you put this collection together?
Well, some of it's all very serendipitous. So, like, if the story that I read, Lulu in Exile, it has, of course, Arnie and Duncan Shu in it. So, why is that? Well, the reason is because I was working on Duncan in China, which is the second story in the book, when the New York Times, fashion of the times, asked me if I would write a piece. And so I just, okay, sure. And Duncan and China were, Duncan and Arnie were on my printer. They were in my mind. So I just kind of used the same characters. And I will say that, as an exercise for students, in order to teach them tonal control, I will sometimes tell them, take the same story and write it in a very different tone, because I feel like I want them to be able to control that. And so almost as if I was in my own classroom, I took the same characters and I wrote a very different story. And so it's kind of serendipitous, right, that they ended up in this other story. And then, in other cases, I was asked to write something for the ACLU, and you know what I mean? That's why you'll see the ACLU actually comes up in one of the stories, Mr. Crime and Punishment and War and Peace, and they start talking about what it would take, to be in the ACLU, and that's because I was writing for the ACLU.
Nice.
But then, you know what I mean? But because I was thinking about that, and I had actually written a story, a book really about Chinese culture and so on. And I had just been talking about that book that's called Girl with the Baggage Claim, explaining the East and West culture gap. And because I had been thinking about some of the things that I had written about in that book, and I was talking about somebody else, Rich Lee, who was in the story that I wrote for the ACLU, kind of reappeared in Rocco Rothko. And so I can just sort of say that that's kind of how I work. I mean, the novel before this, as you may or may not know, was called The Resistors. And, I did go on to write an audible original novella that's told from the point of view of the Auto House, which is, I guess, a character in The Resistors. And they get, you know what I mean? And then I spun off another piece that was for the op-ed, for the Sunday Review for the New York Times, because they were interested in surveillance. And you know what I mean? And then the same characters. In other words, I will kind of do that. And so a lot of it, I can't exactly say, like, different things occasion different connections, but then different characters, pretty soon, these characters are they're all connected. And though I will say that in choosing to put them all in a collection, I think it said, I thought that it represented something about the way that I experience the world, which is that there are, like all these, the way you will, you'll be trucking around in Istanbul and you'll run into this person you knew from high school, and you discover everybody's kind of, connected in these very unexpected ways. And so I actually thought that, that actually was kind of true to my experience, and it's not something you see represented very often. And I was like, well, that's how I experience the world. And also, when you see them again, they're often very changed, and I was interested in that. And also, you don't know the whole story of how they've changed and how they, why they are the way, and I thought that's true to life too. We really only glimpse these things. And I was interested, so I was interested in that. And I think too, when, given the whole subject of this book, which is, the whole way that China has changed us, there is a way in which you could never begin to try to get all of that onto the page. And so there's a way too, in which sort of suggesting that you don't know the whole story just seemed true to, what's really representable, I guess, of my subject. Does that make sense?
Oh, I love that. Thank you. And it was really interesting to see characters at a different stage of their life. So you met somebody kind of young and full, Duncan kind of has this, he is a bit aimless. He wants to go to China just to see the pottery and take in some of the beauty and culture, and finds himself a bit over his head in some situations. And then you snap forward and you're like, oh, look, everything turned out okay, or everything turned out in this really unexpected way. And of course he's different then, because he lived through everything. I love sort of the follow-ups on even minor characters make their recurrence, and you find out what happened to them or how they're doing now. and some of their stories did not turn out in a happy way. But it was satisfying to hear what it was and how accurate maybe your guesses could have been about their lives. I don't know. They had a lot of life off of the page. So thank you for that.
Well, thank you. I think Harold Bloom said, that the whole point of fiction is to capture, the process of human change. And I think that it's interesting. I'm thinking right now about Grace Paley, because I'm about to do a New Yorker podcast about her tomorrow. And she always talked about how in fiction it's so important that people have the open-endedness of life. And I think it's really true. And I think that's a quality that I seek to represent as well. It's there's a way in which something about a plot makes it seem like you're driving inevitably towards some end. I think it's fine in fiction, but I think in truth it's much more complicated than that. And when you write a collection of stories, you have the advantage of both. You have both the kind of cause and effect of a plot, but you also get to suggest the way in which that's only part of the story. So
that's wonderful. Well, I have a question from the audience here. It says, Gish, I love the anecdote you shared earlier about writing the note from the little girl in heaven to Nixon in hell, first thing when you woke up in the morning. As a writer, I've heard that can be a great time to mine your subconscious for ideas. What are some of your tried and true writing habits?
Well, I have to say that if there was one thing that that I would really recommend to aspiring writers, I myself have a ritual, and that is that as I sit down to write, I make like a little icon of everybody who might have an opinion about what I have to say, and I take that icon and I take it and I drag it and I put it out into the hall. And so that would include, of course, that would include my mother. My mother's now passed away because she would have been the first people to put out in the hall. That included my editor, even though I love my editor, I would put her out in the hall. But basically, I would, and I think that actually this is a very useful exercise for young writers, because in the end, you can't have all those people with you in your office. You must clear them away, because otherwise you can't hear yourself think. I mean? It's like, and especially as we're sort of saying, because you're trying to write what is forbidden, and all those voices that are people in your workshop who didn't like your work, it's like you must get rid of them, because you have a job to do and they're in your way.
That's amazing. And the physicality of it, of physically removing somebody from the space, that says something. That's more than like, oh, mom, I'm not listening right now, but closing the door.
Out in the hall with you. I mean,
no,
you're not
get out of here.
Forever. Do you know what I mean? Like, when I'm done writing, I will come back and I will see you again. But at the moment, I am working.
So will you tell us a little bit? I'm sure you're working on something else. What's on your active writing pile right now? What's next for you?
I do have something next. Actually, I'm not really ready to talk about it, so forgive me. I think that there are times when you can talk about it, and there are times that you're just not ready. And I would say I'm just not ready. But yes, I am working.
Good. Well, see, I feel comforted just knowing that somewhere down the road there's more to look forward to. Have you been reading anything great lately? Any authors that you're really excited about?
Oh, that's a good question. I just read a couple of I've just been reading a couple of young Asian American writers. So I wish I had the galleys here. I don't. I just read Nirmata Podar's Borderlands, which is a wonderful book, very kind of experimental, really challenges our ideas about Western storytelling. Also, Marie Myung-Ok Lee, it's her new book, The Evening Hero. It's really it was quite the page turner. It's really quite wonderful.
Oh,
So,
good. That's
I
on
think
my stack right now. I'm going to move it right to the top.
Yeah, I think that's coming out pretty soon.
Yeah.
So.
Very good. Well, you guys, we just have a couple more minutes left. So we have time for another question or two. Please feel free to drop them into the Q&A or into the chat here. And I see another one it says, "This is wonderful, and I can't wait to read this book. There has been much written about how Amazon has undermined independent bookstores, but what about you and other writers? Is Amazon and more generally the internet really changing your life as an author?"
Oh my God, sure. I think that well, first of all, because what happens to independent bookstores and the publishers happens to us, right? And their pressure becomes our pressure. And Amazon has such a effect downward, forcing prices down. I tell you, we writers, we really feel it. I mean, that means that we're called on to do so much more than we were called on to do in the past, including many things that really should be in production. Every writer is complaining, believe me. Um, but and in a general kind of way, social media, these days it's not really an option for writers not to be on social media. And I'm a very social person, and so there's a way in which I really do love it. But there is a way too in which, I hate having to post about my books and my, my review like all day long. you know. And I mean, I guarantee that, that writer we have to do it. And and to me, I just don't like to be, like, look at me, day in and day out. So, I guess as you look, every job has its, you have to move all those boxes of books, right? Make it.
Yeah, right.
I don't know what to tell you, I mean, it's no one just gets to sit in the bookshop with the wonderful books and enjoy it all. There's always stuff that has to go on, in the back office, and for us writers too. I do worry that social media, that, also just because it grabs so much of people's attention. I worry that people just don't think as well or as deeply, or they're not able to, their attention span just isn't what it was. And that literally they can't get through longer sentences and stuff like that. I worry about that stuff for sure.
Yeah.
But very happily for me, I still have quite a solid readership. So I'm not just belly aching, but I can see it happening. I teach, and I can see, these students, they're glued to the screen, and you don't read as well on a screen as you do on a page. That every study has shown that. You don't imagine as well. You can't picture things as well. So
That's right. Yeah, we have a comment that just came in. "I totally agree that time on social media could be spent on books and deeper thought." Absolutely. Well, guys, you've come to the right place, because here we just teased out some of the fun elements of this beautiful, beautiful book. And that, if you don't mind, Gish, if I just switch to this and let everybody know, this is a great time to remind you that this terrific book, Thank You, Mr. Nixon, by Gish Jen, who's this person right over, oh, which way do I point? This way. Took the time to tell us about this book, and you can pick it up from riverbendbookshop.com, thank you, or your neighborhood bookstore. Gish, do you have a neighborhood bookstore? Do you have one that's like, I'm sure you visit loads of bookstores, but do you have a favorite neighborhood haunt?
I live in Cambridge, Massachusetts, so I am pretty lucky. I am pretty lucky. And so I can't say enough about Harvard Bookstore and Porter Square Books. And I will say, if I can go a couple towns over, the Concord Bookshop and Brookline Booksmith and Belmont Books are pretty cool too. And
That's awesome.
so I mean, I'm very, very, very lucky, I have to say. I mean, we here in Cambridge, Massachusetts, we are bookstore rich in a way that very other communities are.
Well, those are some awesome shops you mentioned. So shout out to all of our friends at all the Cambridge bookstores. But if you are not so lucky to live in Cambridge with all of these stores around you, check out newenglandbooks.org. It's our New England Bookseller Association, and they've got maps by state of bookstores that might be near you, maybe ones that you've never even heard of, like Riverbend Bookshop here in Glastonbury. Really, thank you so much. Thank you to everybody out there in the universe who joined us this evening or this morning, where you are, to talk about this terrific book. Gish, thank you so much. It was really an honor. I feel like I get these bookseller bucket list moments, like authors that I've really admired that I finally get a chance to say hello to. So guys, I hope I didn't blow it. You'll tell me in comments later. But it's really, really exciting. And I love that we get to meet like this. And then I want to give one more thank you to the Boston Globe team, Boston.com, Paul Swiden, Kat Haight, the tech team here, Emily and Bridget, thank you guys for making all of this work. And most sincerely, thank you, Gish, and congratulations on this new book. And you guys pick it up at Riverbend or at a lovely indie bookstore near you.
Oh, well, Swiden's book, don't forget, bookstore too, don't forget
That's
that
right,
one.
Silver Unicorn, I know it's a great
Unicorn.
spot.
Pretty cool. Lovely, really cool little store. If you get a chance to visit, you should definitely drop by.
Definitely do. All right, everyone, thank you all so much. Have a lovely rest of your evening, and we'll see you around the bookshop soon.
Thank you, everyone.